the dimly lit corners of grand palaces and beneath ornate crowns, there resided 25 royal women whose desires challenged the very thrones they served. History deemed them scandalous, while the court labelled them hazardous. Yet, tangled in hushed whispers were tales of vibrant lives, filled with chaos, allure, and relentless defiance. What you're about to uncover is not the sanitized history they've opted to share, but rather the incendiary truths they attempted to erase. Welcome to the wild saga of the 25 most notorious temptresses in British royalty, where power, warfare, fragrances, and indulgence became pivotal political tools. Before we plunge into these shadowy chronicles, if you're captivated by twisted royal narratives, buried secrets, and scandal-infused stories, ensure you are subscribed. A treasure trove of tumult awaits your exploration. And as we embark on this royal descent into the extraordinary, share in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is in your part of the world. We'll be following along. Let's begin with Queen Caroline of Brunswick, who lived from 1768 to 1821. To grasp the essence of Queen Caroline is to immerse oneself in the wild absurdity of royal dysfunction, a woman whose very life became the epicenter of public morality, intimate scandals, and the hypocrisy of kings. She wasn't just a royal spouse, she was essentially a headline from a bygone era of tabloid journalism. Yet, above all else, Caroline mastered the art of defiance. Born to privilege as the daughter of the Duke of Brunswick and Princess Augusta of Great Britain, Caroline never conformed to royal expectations. Even in her youth, she was seen as irreverently bold, often too blunt for society's comfort. Her hygiene was questionable, her humor blunt, and her sense of etiquette downright absent, attributes that oddly made her a fitting partner for George IV, a man allergic to genuine emotion, consumed instead by sarcasm. Their marriage, initiated in 1795, became a disaster before the ink dried on the contract. George arrived drunk and immediately began plotting his escape. Caroline, less than dazzled, viewed her husband as a puffed-up figure, far from the man she had been led to expect. The wedding night felt less like a romantic beginning and more like a solemn political exchange. 9 months later, their daughter, Princess Charlotte, arrived to mark the end of their conjugal obligations. Virtually separated, Caroline was swiftly ushered away from the royal spotlight and abroad, neither in proper exile nor entirely welcomed. What would follow was a 10-year European journey branded as scandalous by the British court, albeit with some truth to that claim. By the time she settled in Italy, her entourage resembled a boisterous court of its own, featuring exotic dancers and low-ranking titans of nobility, crowned by a memorable figure, Bartolomeo Pergami, her chamberlain, whose charm sparked rampant rumors about their relationship. Anxious to preserve the crown's image, the British government undertook what became known as the Milan Commission, a farcical investigation into her conduct. Investigators were dispatched to gather gossip, feeding sensational newspaper stories brimming with tales of secret rendezvous and flirtations. Yet the brilliance of Caroline lay not in the scandals themselves, but in her fearless nonchalance. While her husband buried his indiscretions in secrecy and payouts, Caroline welcomed the scrutiny, seemingly unfazed. When George IV claimed the throne in 1820, he tried to distance himself from her, even offering her a financial incentive to stay away, a proposition she adamantly refused. Instead, she returned to a jubilant public welcome, capturing the hearts of crowds who viewed her as the wronged queen, cast aside and ready to reclaim her place. Then came the infamous trial, a legislative spectacle aimed at stripping her of her title and annulling the marriage, which became a notorious public circus. The House of Lords transformed into a courtroom where witnesses, primarily foreign servants, spoke of alleged improprieties with Pergami. The country was enraptured, akin to the modern draw of reality television. Peering through a scandalous lens, The claims unraveled in flair. One servant testified to witnessing Caroline and Pergamy in a kiss, while another suggested they shared intimate spaces. The accounts were sensational, the questioning moralistic, yet the ruling from the house remained elusive. The public had grown enamored with Caroline's audacity, caring little for propriety, as the throne faltered under scrutiny. Ultimately, the bill was abandoned, preserving her title, though it alluded to a bittersweet victory, as she was barred from George's coronation in 1821. Merely weeks later, she would pass away, igniting a debate among historians regarding the veracity of her many alleged lovers versus the palace's willingness to skew her image as a fallen foreigner. What stands unwavering is this: Queen Caroline lived fiercely, departed dramatically, and left a legacy that held the British crown accountable. While her life was painted in shades of scandal and passion, the next woman upon our list pursued her desires with unabashed openness, seizing every opportunity as if conquering knights in battle, transforming not only history but how women of power would be perceived for generations to come. 2. The enigmatic Queen Isabella of Angoulême, a figure who flourished between roughly 1188 and 1246, stands out not merely for her controversial actions but for the shadows they cast, lurking far beyond her husband's reign and echoing through the ages. Isabella didn't just outlive King John of England. She effectively dismantled his reputation, incinerated her own, and waltzed in luxury over the ruins, clad in sumptuous French silk. Yet, amidst the unrelenting criticism she faced over centuries, a perplexing question still lingers. Was she a pawn in the treacherous game of politics, or a woman who thrived on dismantling the very fabric of royal propriety? As she wed John in 1200 at the tender age of 12, a stark truth of the medieval period, Isabella became a pawn in a larger political chess match. King John, nearly 30 and already divorced, took her not for love, but to tactically outmaneuver a rival noble family in Aquitaine. This union ignited significant outrage. Isabella had been promised to Hugh of Lucerne, a prominent French noble. Thus began a bitter conflict, a lengthy Anglo-French rivalry that ultimately stripped England of its continental influence. In merely gaining the title of Queen of England, Isabella unwittingly became an agent of political upheaval. Had her tale ended there, Isabella might have faded into the annals as a mere background figure in a volatile political saga. Yet, she was no silent queen. Described by contemporaries as striking, clever, and fiercely willful, her reputation only darkened, as later accounts branded her more scandalous than she ever anticipated. Upon King John's death in 1216, Isabella found herself a wealthy widow, politically astute, and far from willing to recede into obscurity. Instead of withdrawing quietly to serve behind her son, little Henry III, Isabella returned to France, armed with her royal influence and ready to stir chaos anew. Within the corridors of French nobility, her true essence emerged, unshackled and dangerously alluring. No longer restricted by the whims of the English court or bound to a volatile husband, she quickly surrounded herself with admirers, including her long-lost betrothed, the noble Hugh of Lucerne. They married. Was it vengeance or true affection? The lines blur, revealing the tantalizing ambiguity of their union. As she took the reins of her life, Isabella was said to host a vibrant household that felt more like an extravagant salon of love than a staid Dutch, a realm where young knights and nobles gravitated. While accounts of her escapades became muddled, the implications were unmistakable. Isabella was not merely running a household, she crafted an enticing world. French chroniclers, dismissive of her English ties, spun tales of her irresistible charm, transforming her into a proverbial seductress within their writings, representing the dangerous allure of unchecked female desire. Yet, amidst this barrage of libel and rumor, we must ponder: were they truthfully chronicling, or simply punishing her for not adhering to the expectations of a widow. Regardless, Isabella actively complicated her narrative. She frequently engaged in political machinations, even opposing her own son's interests. In a daring act, she sided with a conspiracy against the French king, a move that would certainly not favor a discreet reputation. When repercussions followed, she sought refuge in a convent, not for penance, but for security. Her later years remained steeped in intrigue. Though officially withdrawing from society, whispers of clandestine rendezvous and intricate plots shadowed her every step within the convent's walls. When she passed away in 1246, Isabella left behind not a sanitized legacy, but a tapestry woven with love, scorn, trepidation, and desire. Today, she remains a figure draped in shadows. Was she a voracious femme fatale basking in power? Or a savvy survivor in a realm that used, discarded, and silenced queens? One thing is undeniable. Isabella thwarted invisibility. She redefined her narrative. While Isabella's story weaves a rich tapestry of courtly scandal, our next royal enigma features a woman whose impact rippled through the fabric of her time, one who stirred an entire civil war, fueled by fervors that may have ignited it. 2 royals down, 23 more tales await, each more riveting than the last. For those intrigued by forbidden romances, political upheavals, and queens that challenge the status quo, hit that subscribe button now. And while in this realm of royal intrigue, share with us in the comments your location and the hour you ventured into this uncanny tale. 3. Margaret of Anjou, 1430 to 1482. If there were ever a queen capable of making kings vanish, shattering armies, and yet still being accused of wielding too much feminine power, it was undoubtedly Margaret of Anjou. She didn't merely step into the English monarchy, she burst forth like a storm wrapped in silk, ushering in a life marked by the tumult of war, whispers, and a desire that thrived in the flickering candlelight of a court netted in ambivalence toward her. They could neither revere her nor fear her, yet they were all too eager to direct their blame at her. Let's rewind the clock. Margaret hailed from the Valois family in France, a princess and the niece of the formidable King Charles VII. Her marriage at the tender age of 15 to King Henry VI of England, a man whose piety overshadowed his decisiveness, was the catalyst for her ascent. Mystery loomed as Henry's mental health waned, creating a political vacuum ripe for exploitation. Almost immediately, rumors echoed through the court, whispers questioning her participation in council meetings, her mediation among the nobility, and the audacity of her issuing commands. For the conservative elite of 15th century England, a queen acting as a ruler was foreign and alarming, thereby stoking the fires of suspicion. Unsurprisingly, the favored weapon of political enemies emerged: salacious gossip. Chroniclers partial to her opponents cast dubious shadows over her interactions with key figures like Edmund Beaufort, the second Duke of Somerset and a staunch Lancastrian supporter. There were whispers questioning the legitimacy of her son, Prince Edward, with allegations suggesting he was not a child of Henry but born of Somerset. While concrete evidence of Margaret's infidelity remains elusive, the court of public perception, shaped by scribe's pen, favored narrative over facts. The prevailing story was clear: a weak king coupled with a powerful queen undercut the status quo. But far from retreating, Margaret embraced her role. As tension escalated between the rival Lancastrians and Yorkists, she took to battle, leading armies, donning armour, and galvanizing her troops personally at Wakefield and St. Albans. Dread enveloped her adversaries, and she morphed from queen to legendary villain, seductive, ruthless, and distinctly foreign, serving as the perfect scapegoat. Critics portrayed her as a Lady Macbeth of the Wars of the Roses, coddling ambition and stratagems, as rumours of her alleged liaisons with Lancastrian lords swirled. Her court became painted as a hub of uncontrolled desires, with each chronicler's ink hinting that her power must stem from seduction. Yet this narrative neglected a glaring truth. Margaret was an astute strategist, unparalleled in her capabilities. The English nobility remained incapable of grasping a queen's agency, instead relegating her influence to wild tales of scandal. With the prolonged warring roses, her fortunes began to crumble, armies faltered, her son fell in battle, and her husband suffered 2 depositions. Following the Yorkist triumph, Margaret found herself captured and imprisoned. Once a figure of dread, she became a symbol warning against the ambitions of women. Eventually ransomed back to France, she faded into near obscurity, stripped of power and armies. Still, the whispers of her infamy endured. Allegations of clandestine romances and plots for resurgence lingered. What remains undeniable is this: Margaret of Anjou was a queen at a time when such roles were forbidden for women. For her ambition, she was branded a seductress and schemer. Regardless of the veracity of the secret affairs, they leached onto her legacy, shaping perceptions like wax sealing a royal decree. If Margaret faced derision for her ambition amid civil unrest, the next woman on our journey needed no battlefield. A mere cocktail, a smoke, and a regrettable phone call would suffice to ignite her own fiery saga. Princess Margaret, Countess of Snowdon, born in 1930 and leaving us in 2002, was a royal like no other, transforming scandal into a form of art all her own. As the youngest sister of Queen Elizabeth II, she was born into a world of opulence, navigating life within the gilded confines of royal heritage, all while knowing her role was destined to be secondary in the longest-standing constitutional monarchy. But Margaret made an audacious choice. She refused to live in monotony. Her act of defiance was akin to performance art, not radical nor revolutionary, but rather the kind that draped itself in velvet and smoked leisurely behind cigarette clouds. Born at Glamis Castle, a place echoing with the spectral tragedy of Macbeth, her life unfolded much like a drama filled with vivid color and defined by royal expectations. From debutante balls to piano recitals, her world shifted dramatically in 1936 when her uncle, King Edward VIII, abdicated for love, thrusting her father into the role of King George VI. Suddenly, the 6-year-old Margaret transformed from a mere ornament of royalty into an essential figure, but she was far from impressed. Unlike her elder sister, Queen Elizabeth, whose demeanor was calm and calculated, Margaret was sharp-tongued, spirited, and known to draw the very attention the royal family sought to evade. Publicly, she was bold, smoking openly, laughing too freely, and delivering witticisms at state functions, ultimately entangling herself in a scandalous romance with the divorced war hero, Group Captain Peter Townsend. Their story was tabloid gold, rife with forbidden love and royal constraints, fascinating the public as they followed every twist and turn. Unfortunately, pressure from the church and the crown forced her to abandon their plan to marry in 1955, a moment that exposed the heart-wrenching tension between love and duty. The public rallied momentarily around her heartbreak, but what followed was a thrilling descent into a life filled with cocktails, affairs, and a vibrant social scene where titles mattered less than charm. Margaret became a fixture among London's elite, a captivating mix of aristocrats, artists, and those with more dubious reputations. With companions like Mick Jagger and Princess Grace of Monaco, she embraced the fashionable lifestyle, adorning herself in Dior and playfully engaging with the media, all while moving through Kensington Palace as if she were the lead in her own noir film. Her desire for connection attracted many, including a much younger lover, landscape gardener Roddy Llewellyn, who became part of the headlines that scandalized the nation. As she roamed sun-kissed shores, the paparazzi couldn't keep away, shattering the royal facade and exposing the vulnerabilities beneath. Yet, lurking behind her glamorous exterior, the truth was far darker. Her marriage to photographer Anthony Armstrong Jones began as an electrifying union but devolved into bitterness and infidelity, both sides caught in a frigid emotional standoff that could rival Chekhov's darkest tales. Though she maintained her royal guise in public, displaying impeccable fashion and cutting wit, behind closed doors, she faced increasing isolation, illness, and the haunting spectre of lost opportunities. Upon her passing in 2002, the public mourned both the woman and the ideal she represented, a flawed, captivating figure who once exuded life, daring, and charisma. In many ways, Princess Margaret serves as a cautionary figure, a cocktail in hand, a tragic romantic, an exuberant hedonist entangled in her own legend, and a victim of a system that granted her power without agency. And as we reflect on the poignant scandals of her life, we turn our gaze to another royal, who, while cautiously igniting her own drama, would ultimately unleash consequences that affected a crown, a kingdom, and an unfortunate physician. 5. Lady Caroline Matilda of Great Britain, 1751 to 1775. Picture this. If Princess Margaret embodied the rebellious spirit of the royal family like a sultry singer in a dimly lit Soho bar, then Lady Caroline Matilda was a sweeping, tragic opera, filled with hidden romances, political upheaval, and a tale so compelling it feels straight out of a storybook, yet it was all too real. Welcome to Denmark. Caroline Matilda, the youngest daughter of Frederick, Prince of Wales, and the sister of future King George III, was not initially destined to hold sway on the grand stage of European politics. But her fate would soon change dramatically. At just 15, she was wed to her first cousin, King Christian VII of Denmark, a man often noted for his unpredictability rather than his royal prowess. Their marriage was less a union of love than a mere political arrangement. Christian, eccentric and grappling with mental illness, showed little interest in ruling or in his new bride. Arriving in Copenhagen, naive and full of dreams, Caroline Matilda discovered a world where whispers bounced off the palace walls in Danish, and the king would vanish for days on end. Tragically, her needs were overlooked, with rumors suggesting he preferred the company of his dog over that of his queen. In an alternate scenario, Caroline might have endured this plight quietly, perhaps fading into obscurity alongside other neglected royal spouses. Yet fate, as it often does, had a different tale in store, one wrapped around the figure of Johann Friedrich Struensee. This German physician, not born into nobility and lacking Danish roots, somehow infiltrated the royal court as a doctor before his true ambitions became evident. He quickly won over Christian VII, leveraging the king's erratic behavior and his own adeptness at manipulation. Before long, Struensee was not just treating the king's health but crafting decisions and policies, all under the guise of Enlightenment ideals. However, it was his growing bond with Caroline Matilda that truly turned heads. Here lies the moment when history intertwines with intrigue. Sources ranging from devoted biographers to suspicious court insiders suggest their relationship blossomed beyond shared interests in literature and reform. They spent considerable time together, alone, stirring whispers through a court rife with tension and espionage. Late-night visits to her chambers and private rides through the countryside sparked gossip that became increasingly public. Her once-dimmed spirit seemed revived, and court ladies began to notice, igniting the flames of scandal across Denmark. What began as mere chatter soon morphed into political propaganda, branding their relationship as treasonous, amplifying Struensee's revolutionary ideas while supposedly seducing the queen. The climate of unrest escalated until a coup became inevitable. In January 1772, chaos erupted. The queen was snatched from her bed under the cloak of night, and Struensee faced similar fate. Within days, their private letters spilled their secrets into the streets of Copenhagen, their names echoing in every alley. Struensee was hastily tried and executed. Caroline Matilda, a once celebrated queen now disgraced and alone, was exiled to Celle Castle in Hanover at the tender age of 21. In seizure of her former life, she lingered in limbo, stripped of power and purpose. Her offspring, including a daughter thought to be Struensee's, were taken from her, leaving her in a solitude filled with memories of what she once enjoyed: books, serene gardens, and letters that never arrived. She would pass away just 3 years later at the age of 23, officially of scarlet fever, though some murmured of heartbreak and others of poison. Still, whispers lingered that she simply surrendered to despair. Caroline Matilda stands as a poignant symbol of royal misfortune, where passion and politics collide in an unavoidable tempest. Even centuries on, her narrative serves as a warning, a cautionary tale about the dangers of loving the wrong man in the right palace, particularly when his ideas threaten the status quo. However, if Caroline Matilda's fate unfolded from romance cloaked in reform, our next royal scandal shimmers beneath a facade of polished elegance, a narrative intertwined with soft whispers, ostentatious devotion, and flirtations so expertly crafted they nearly slip through the cracks of history. 6. Queen Mary II of England, who lived from 1662 to 1694, is often remembered as the devoted half of a politically sophisticated duo, co-ruling with her husband, William of Orange, following the Glorious Revolution of 1688. She epitomized regal composure and made fidelity fashionable, projecting an image so refined that even statues appeared to avert their gaze. Yet, beneath the elegant facade and ceremonial grandeur lay a personal life marked by shadows, a tapestry of close affiliations with favored men and courtiers that sparked whispers, gossip, and lingering accusations, casting doubt on her virtue. Born in 1662 to James, Duke of York, later King James II, and his wife and Hyde, Mary's youth was fraught with religious strife and family turmoil, with a future curiously orchestrated rather than chosen. By her 15th year, she was wed to her cousin William, a partnership rooted in political obligation that reportedly brought her to tears upon hearing of it. Though William was devoted to his Protestant faith and the divine right of kings, their marriage, while respectfully diplomatic, lacked passion. Her letters referred to him as Dear William, yet they resonated more with dutiful respect than romantic sentiment, akin to a tenant thanking a landlord for keeping rent steady. When James II was dethroned in the Glorious Revolution and Mary ascended with William, she was portrayed as the monarchy's dignified face, a Protestant figure who was poised but politically muted. She often yielded to William's authority, keeping her opinion subdued, and appeared absorbed in her charitable pursuits and her role within the Anglican community. However, intrigue simmered beneath this facade. Queen Mary, despite her outward holiness, nurtured a web of intense connections with male courtiers, some deemed platonic while others mysteriously vanished from history. One noteworthy figure was Sidney Dolphin, a discreet Tory statesman, whose correspondence with Mary raised alarms within her circle. While he led a humble profile, whispers suggested his access to the Queen's private space was too frequent, too intimate. Another courtly figure, Henry Sidney, was said to share lengthy, personal conversations with Mary that defied the rigid expectations of her royal demeanor. Royal marriages at the time were stifled by strict performance. Thus, Mary's comfort with Sidney sparked suspicion, not from what was observed, but from what remained unseen. The Dutch ambassador himself noted her particular favoritism, a term often suggesting deeper connections at court. The most scandalous implications, however, arose in anonymous pamphlets from the early 1690s that hinted at Mary's emotional entanglements with younger men, some lacking political significance, their names fading into obscurity. Although these allegations were too delicate for formal examination in Parliament, They found traction in the quiet echoes of court gossip, especially among those who deemed her moral perfection highly improbable. Defenders insisted she was merely sociable and in need of companionship during William's lengthy absences. Perhaps true, yet the divide between emotional closeness and something more was perilously narrow in a court where proximity equated to influence, and queens were expected to stifle human desires beneath elaborate attire and a composed exterior. And then, the ultimate twist. After a brief yet politically stable reign, Mary fell gravely ill with smallpox in 1694. Approaching death, her legacy was once again adorned in sanctity, grieved as an ideal queen, a virtuous consort enshrined in the annals of righteousness. History, eager to simplify narratives, largely complied. Allegations faded, letters vanished, and Mary II was preserved, both literally and figuratively, as an icon of virtuous rule. Yet for those who dared to delve deeper, a lingering question remained. Was she truly the Virgin Queen her portrait professed, or did she simply master the art of appearance? If Mary II left traces of mystery, our next monarch ensured her legacy would thrum with intensity, a queen who donned her scandals as armor, rendering even the grandest crusades mere background to her captivating love life. 7. Elelonina of Aquitaine, from 1122 to 1204, was a force of nature who transcended the lives of her husbands, surviving empires, crusades, and a restrictive perception of female authority. She reigned as the queen of both France and England, a mother to 10, with 2 of her children ascending to kingship, all while becoming a figure of intense fascination across medieval Europe. Her tale wasn't about the quiet life of a domestic ruler, but rather one of ballads, intrigues, rebellions, and a carefully crafted image of being too powerful, too clever, and far too intimate with a multitude of men for the comfort of the male chroniclers trying futilely to contain her story. Born in 1122 as the Duchess of Aquitaine, she inherited a richly cultured land filled with troubadours and chivalric virtues, where passion was not merely accepted, but encouraged. Fluent in Latin and well-versed in law, Elelonina wielded significant political acumen, more than many of her male counterparts. At just 15, she wed Louis VI of France, but the marriage quickly proved to be a poor fit. Louis, with a temperament more suitable for the clergy than the crown, contrasted sharply with Eleanor's ambition and fiery presence. When she accompanied Louis on the Second Crusade in 1147, she was not a passive spectator but led her own troops into battle, challenging the expectations of her gender and igniting moral outrage across Europe. Scandal soon followed, particularly concerning her close relationship with her uncle, Raymond of Poitiers, which further fueled whispers that, ultimately, contributed to the dissolution of her marriage in 1152. The Church permitted the annulment, citing consanguinity, an oversight that took an astonishing 15 years to emerge. But this was just the beginning. 8 weeks post-divorce, she wed Henry Plantagenet, the future King Henry II of England, shocking the French court once more. Together, they had 8 children, including the infamous Richard the Lionheart and John. Yes, that John. Yet, their initial romance shifted into a fierce tug-of-war for power. Eleanor was no mere broodmare. She governed her territories, presided over courts, and cultivated a vibrant court in Poitiers, a hub of artistic and romantic convergence alongside a plethora of male companionship. Whispers of her alleged affairs with Henry's illegitimate brother Geoffrey, and even her son Richard's close friends continually bolstered the narrative that her influence derived not from her royal birth but her seduction. Despite the slanders, where men were celebrated for their charisma, Eleanor faced scorn as an overly sexualized threat to the patriarchal norms. In 1173, she joined her sons in rebellion against Henry II, resulting in a 15-year imprisonment. While Henry indulged in his own affairs, Eleanor remained in semi-captivity, haunting the political landscape. Following Henry's death, she emerged once more, acting as regent while Richard fought abroad, negotiating with popes and arranging royal unions at nearly 70. When she departed this world in 1204, at the age of 82, she left behind an influential dynasty and a legacy of a woman who exercised sovereign authority, articulated the beauty of poetry, and defied conventions as if she had rewritten the rulebook on femininity in power. The tales of her liaisons may have persisted, yet maybe that was her true achievement. Eleanor exemplified a queenly figure of rebellion, the mother to kings, and a woman whose very essence stirred intimidation far greater than any army. In redefining what it meant to be a medieval queen, she paved the way for our next remarkable figure, who would transform the perception of being single amid an era that dictated the need for compliance, all while accumulating influence, poetic mastery, and a notably attractive circle of courtiers. Queen Elizabeth I, reigning from 1533 to 1603, is often known as the Virgin Queen, a title that served not only as a political maneuver but as a lifelong commitment that she transformed into a formidable asset. This crown of chastity, essential in her era, was worn with a dramatic flair and wielded a subtle threat that kept suitors, courtiers, and entire nations at bay. Historians still ponder whether she truly lived up to this title, as if fearing the very queen might emerge from the shadows to correct their interpretations. Born amidst scandal as the daughter of Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn, Elizabeth embodied a royal enigma from the outset. Too intelligent to dismiss and too perilous to marry off, she was far too independent for a society that expected queens to remain silent and dutifully fruitful. Her formative years were a whirlwind of court intrigue, societal upheaval, and family chaos that would shame modern tabloids. One moment she was proclaimed princess, the next deemed illegitimate, then swiftly reinstated, threatened, and imprisoned. Through it all, she absorbed a crucial lesson in Tudor politics: trust no one, particularly those who profess to love you. By the time she claimed the throne at 25, Elizabeth had navigated a minefield of political treachery that most rulers never experience in a lifetime. Once crowned, she made a daring, thoroughly calculated decision to remain unmarried, at least officially. However, the narrative thickens. While she was legally single, her heart was far from empty. She engaged with numerous noblemen, diplomats, poets, and even pirates. Some became cherished allies, others turned into legends, but all were intertwined with the pressing question: did Elizabeth truly embody the Virgin Queen, or was this simply the most brilliant marketing campaign in royal history? Among these figures was Robert Dudley, the Earl of Leicester, her childhood companion, and according to many, her secret paramour. He was charming and ambitious, albeit committed to another. His wife's suspicious death in 1560 only amplified the speculation surrounding them. Though they never wed, their bond was undeniable. She provided him cozy lodgings and flirtatious letters, leaving diplomats wondering just who held the reins of power. Next in line was Sir Walter Raleigh, an explorer and poet whose adoration for Elizabeth was more grandiose than tangible. Their exchanges were filled with ambition and flattery, until his ill-fated marriage to one of her attendants earned him a stay in the Tower of London, revealing that while she may have never married, jealousy was very much alive in her court. Then emerged Robert Devereux, the lively Earl of Essex, whose youth and boldness danced dangerously close to treason, capturing Elizabeth's affections before meeting a tragic end at her command. Their relationship thundered with political tension, intense loyalty, and revealed a volatile mix of love and power. Elizabeth almost entertained foreign suitors, like the French Duke of Anjou, nicknamed her Frog, using them for diplomatic leverage before ultimately rejecting them. In truth, Elizabeth's romantic pursuits mirrored her reign: performative, strategic, and laced with artistry. Whether physical intimacy ever entered her life is secondary. What mattered was the potency of her allure and her ability to keep potential suitors in check without ever relinquishing her control. She crafted courtship into political strategy and turned flirtation into state negotiations. Though she skillfully projected desire while denying fulfillment, her personal life ultimately exacted a toll. Elizabeth died without an heir, alone yet immortalized, her virginity standing as a testament while her lovers faded into the background. With her image still looming over British history, she became more than a queen. She transformed into a captivating myth adorned with a crown. Conversely, her successor wasn't so restrained. Her path was marked by visceral passion, betrayal, and the ruinous remnants of a monarchy struggling to keep her under its thumb. 9. Mary, Queen of Scots, from 1542 to 1587. While Queen Elizabeth I was the icy strategist, adept at maneuvering with delicate precision, Mary was the fiery soul, attempting to navigate the same treacherous waters, yet she played without gloves, her heart stark against the political turmoil. She presided over 3 kingdoms, buried 3 husbands, and left behind a mosaic of conspiracy theories far more captivating than the few portraits that were painted of her. Her tale, far from a mere warning, unfolded as a dramatic saga performed in candlelight before a captivated court that could hardly look away. Chaos marked Mary's beginning. She ascended to the Scottish throne at just 6 days old, her reign starting even before she could support her own head. Scotland, during her reign, was a landscape fraught with conflict, controlled by noble factions preferring swords over diplomacy. To safeguard the infant queen, her guardians sent her to the opulent court of France, where she grew up and wed the heir, Francis II. For a brief moment, it seemed like a fairy tale, as she became queen consort at just 16. But tragedy struck with Francis's untimely death from illness a year later. Alone, stateless, and politically hazardous, she returned to a Scotland that felt more like an unwelcome presence at a family parting than a regal homecoming. Upon her return, Mary confronted monumental challenges: a fractured nobility, a burgeoning Protestant Reformation, and her own chaotic personal life, which seemed to spiral like an ever-slowing disaster through the rugged landscape. Her first error, as foes would label it, was marrying her cousin, Henry Stuart, Lord Darnley, a decision that appeared advantageous on paper. Darnley was handsome and of royal lineage, yet his arrogance and insecurity rendered him detestable to almost all, including Mary. The marriage rapidly deteriorated, marred by Darnley's violent jealousy and notorious drunkenness. When she bore their son, James, yes, the future James VI of Scotland and James I of England, Darnley's reaction was less than joyous, filled with suspicion instead. And then came the murder. In 1566, during dinner, her secretary and rumoured confidant, David Rizzio, was brutally stabbed in front of her, a scandal believed to be driven by Darnley and a group of paranoid nobles. Whether there was a romantic involvement between Mary and Rizzio remains a mystery, yet the brutality of the act evoked intense scrutiny. Just weeks later, Darnley was found dead under enigmatic circumstances, his lifeless body lying in a garden, suspiciously unblemished despite an explosion nearby. The primary suspect? James Hepburn, Earl of Bothwell, whom Mary would marry shortly after. This act was the breaking point. The Scottish nobility, already distrustful of her foreign influences and Catholic beliefs, now saw her as a compromised figure, morally dubious, politically reckless, maybe even involved in Darnley's murder. Her union with Bothwell was never embraced by the public. Accusations of abduction clung to her name. The backlash was immediate and merciless. Mary was imprisoned, forced to relinquish her throne to her infant son, and she witnessed her world collapse from the confines of a damp stone cell. Yet, Mary's spirit was too fierce to remain subdued. She escaped, rallied an army, and aimed to reclaim her crown, but her efforts faltered. Seeking refuge from her cousin Elizabeth, she instead fell into 19 years of comfortable captivity, part guest, part prisoner, and a political ticking time bomb for everyone involved. Throughout it all, the whispers continued. Mary became tangled in multiple conspiracies, some real, others likely fabricated. The most infamous was the Babington Plot, a Catholic scheme to assassinate Elizabeth and place Mary on the English throne. It remains debated whether she sanctioned it, but her name appeared in incriminating letters, prompting her trial and execution in 1587. Yet her image endured. To her supporters, her legacy transformed her into a Catholic martyr, enchanting, tragic, betrayed. To her critics, she embodied a queen whose romantic misadventures and flawed political judgments led to her demise. And for contemporary historians, Mary is a puzzle, part victim, part orchestrator of her fate, living in an era that exacted a hefty toll on women with lofty aspirations. Her reign was bold, her love was fervent, and the price she paid was steep. Still, her legacy endured through poetry, artwork, and the son she left behind, who would achieve what she could not, the unification of the Scottish and English thrones. Yet, while Mary's fall resulted from a cascade of misguided romantic entanglements and political naivety, our next royal boldly faced scandal head-on, whispering secrets in the shadows until even the king could no longer turn a blind eye. Catherine Howard, born around 1523 and executed in 1542, serves as a striking cautionary tale woven from the threads of youth and luxurious fabric. The fifth wife of Henry VIII, and a cousin to Anne Boleyn, she flashed like a brief spark within the royal court, only to be extinguished with chilling efficiency. Often cast as a mere punchline in tales of teenage folly, her narrative reveals a haunting exploration of desire, power, and reputation, especially under the watchful eyes of the crown. Emerging from the ambitious Howard lineage, Catherine was raised amidst the echoes of her family's storied past, and Boleyn's rise and tragic fall seemed to linger like a spectre. Yet, while one might expect such shadows to cast caution, they did not stifle Catherine's spirit. She grew under the guidance of her step-grandmother, the Dowager Duchess of Norfolk, an ambitious figure who prioritized survival over moral instruction. In this peculiar upbringing, Catherine thrived amidst adolescent revelry and clandestine meetings, forming attachments that would echo ominously in her future. It was in this setting that the aging King Henry VIII, himself haunted by marital misfortunes, found Catherine irresistible. She embodied the vitality the court yearned for. Just 16 or 17, and twice the king's youthful vigor, she captured the court's gaze. Their courtship unfolded swiftly, culminating in her coronation as queen in 1540, adorned as a jewel in the crown of an aging monarch who labelled her his rose without a thorn, a phrase not built to endure. From the onset, murmurs of suspicion circulated about her rapid ascent, her captivating charm, and her past entanglements, including rumoured liaisons with Francis Darham, who some claimed to have been informally betrothed to her. The shadows of a past would soon unleash turmoil when Thomas Culpeper, a striking courtier, allegedly shared private moments with the Queen. Rumours painted them as lovers, though the truth remained enveloped in speculation. In 1541, as courtly rivals sensed vulnerability, they discreetly fed Thomas Cranmer, the Archbishop of Canterbury, hard evidence of scandal. With the swift brutality of the royal machine, the facade began to crumble. Interrogations ensued, confessions extracted, and whispers transformed into accusations. Ultimately, Durham's arrest implicated Culpeper, dragging Catherine's name through the labyrinth of royal scandal. Though the evidence was primarily conjectural, its explosive nature could not be ignored. Both men faced execution, while Catherine was stripped of her title and locked away, her radiant gardens replaced by the cold confines of the Tower. It was a tragic decline. Once the Queen of England, now a prisoner entangled in the very fabric of monarchy's ruthless nature, she met her end in February 1542, barely aged 19. History in its meticulous precision often depicts Catherine as nothing more than a reckless youth, a reflection of the tragic fate shared by her cousin Anne Boleyn. Yet the chaos of her story is layered and poignant. She was a young woman in a male-dominated world, valued for her beauty but punished for her curiosity, victimized by a system that masked her true power. Catherine's narrative transcends mere scandal. It's a tale of vulnerability preyed upon by overarching authority, revealing a glaring truth. She wore the crown, but safety was never hers to possess. Yet, while Catherine's downfall was born of youthful indiscretion and royal scruples, the next queen in our series would master the art of navigating whispers, turning them to her benefit with an allure that no one, not even her adversaries, could resist. 11. Anne Boleyn. Circa 1501 to 1536. Anne Boleyn didn't quietly enter the annals of history. She burst forth with an unapologetic fervor that pierced the very fabric of Tudor protocol. To some, she is celebrated as a Protestant champion who dismantled the medieval establishment. To others, she is viewed as a home wrecker who shattered the sanctity of the English Church and the marriage bed of a king accustomed to privilege. One truth remains undeniable, and was not merely spoken of in hushed tones. She was the subject of fervent discussion, outright scorn, and ultimately, her own tragic downfall. Before stepping into the role of queen, she was an enigma, born into a family of modest ambition yet educated amidst the majesty of the Dutch and French courts. There, she acquired not only languages and manners but also the alluring style that many of her English contemporaries lacked. When and returned to England, she was no mere demure flower but a polished woman adept in the intricacies of flirtation and power. By the time she captivated King Henry VIII, and had not been new to the royal sphere, she'd served alongside his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, and her sister Mary had already been discarded after sharing the king's bed, and was anticipated to be another fleeting romance, but she resisted, whether out of strategy or genuine conviction. This refusal intrigued Henry, a man unused to denial. What transpired was a drawn-out courtship, a relentless pursuit spanning 7 years, marked by passionate love letters filled with grand metaphors and an almost desperate tone. He bestowed jewels, titles, and a promise of queenship upon her, yet this path demanded England venture into uncharted territory, annulling a royal marriage based on spiritual awkwardness, a void created by Catherine's failure to present a male heir. And, Henry believed, would fulfill that prophecy. However, as she awaited the unraveling of Henry's ties to Rome, her circle quickly shifted from allies to adversaries. Courtiers who once viewed her as a beguiling distraction now feared her as a significant threat. Even Thomas More, a man once held in high regard by Henry, refused to accept her queenship, with dire consequences. When, in 1533, and Henry secretly wed and soon crowned her as queen, she had already conceived a child. Yet this child was a daughter, Elizabeth, a girl, not the son they fervently hoped for. This marked a perilous turning point for Anne. Having ascended through sheer defiance and charm, she was now expected to produce male heirs and maintain peace. Instead, she brought forth wit, strong opinions, a string of miscarriages, and an air of suspicion within the court, and resisted being the docile wife that the realm anticipated. She voiced her beliefs, pushed for reform, and clashed openly with powerful figures, including Henry. Then came the scandalous whispers. Accusations arose claiming she had multiple lovers, musicians, courtiers, and even her brother, George. These sensational charges were more theatrical than credible, likely orchestrated by Thomas Cromwell, a master political maneuverer. Yet, these rumors persisted. After enduring 3 miscarriages and with Henry's wandering attention shifting to Jane Seymour, Anne's grip on power weakened, making her vulnerable and, ultimately, disposable. In May 1536, she was arrested and taken to the Tower of London, facing charges of adultery, incest, and treason, her so-called evidence being circumstantial dialogue, coerced admissions, and the king's selective belief. 5 men were executed, including her brother George, and stood trial against a jury of her foes, eloquently defending herself as the walls closed in around her. On May 19th, she met her fate at the hands of a French executioner, a grim tribute to a woman whose only true misstep may have been outshining her peers. However, rather ironically, her death did not diminish her impact. Instead, and transformed into legend. Fiercely revered by Protestants as a martyr, condemned by Catholics as a wanton, adopted as a victim of patriarchy by feminists, and regarded as an enigma by historians, all while a singular theme lingered: her downfall was deeply personal. A verdict not entirely rooted in politics or faith but in the very essence of her being, a woman accused not simply of ambition but of reckless desire, of being too assertive, too captivating, and far too unwilling to play the submissive partner. The truth behind the allegations mattered little. The myth had taken root. In this narrative, Anne Boleyn remains forever a queen who dared to believe that power might be hers to claim. Yet, while Anne faced consequences for her challenges from the king's side, the next royal we encounter did not confront from a throne. She emerged from the shadows, cloaked in whispers and secrecy, her ambitions hidden within the folds of her silk gowns. Queen Elizabeth Woodville, born in 1437, was an unexpected figure in the annals of English royalty. Lacking noble lineage, she arrived at court not with grand alliances or immense dowries, but with an allure that was as captivating as it was potent. Her story not only redefined the essence of kingship in England, but was also woven with intrigue, loyalty, and whispers of ambitions that reached far beyond the royal seat. Once a widow mourning her husband, Sir John Grey, who perished fighting against Edward IV, the very man she later wed, Elizabeth's past could have buried her chances. Yet, it fueled the creation of a myth. She transformed from a sorrowful widow standing at the roadside, pleading for her lands to be returned, into the beloved of a king. This narrative, however, has a darker undercurrent. Critics argued that Elizabeth was not merely a mourning spouse but a cunning strategist, a woman who knew how to exhibit herself as an irresistible allure. In a clandestine union in 1464, Edward IV married Elizabeth, a commoner and a widow, a union that sent shockwaves through the realm, alienating noble families and leaving foreign dignitaries astounded. Richard Neville, the Earl of Warwick, had meticulously orchestrated plans for Edward's alliance with a princess from France. This sudden marriage undermined those aspirations and propelled Elizabeth into a powerful position. The saga didn't end with their vows. Elizabeth quickly orchestrated advancements for her kin, elevating her family from obscurity to prominence. The Woodvilles, once minor figures, now carved their way into the upper echelons of court life. As her siblings gained noble titles and marriages to powerful allies, rumors began to swirl, from elevating Elizabeth to the role of a manipulative seductress to insinuations of dark sorcery passed down through her family. In a world rife with scandal, Elizabeth's alleged intrigues overshadowed Edward's own infidelities. Accusations labeled her as the architect of marriage arrangements that served as political maneuvers and painted her as a puppet master orchestrating her narrative while being unjustly vilified as conniving. Following Edward's untimely death in 1483, Elizabeth's once solid world unraveled. Her sons fell under the control of their uncle, Richard, Duke of Gloucester, who rendered them illegitimate and crowned himself Richard III. It marked the beginning of her exile from power, a fallen queen, retreating to Westminster Abbey, clutching the remnants of her family. Yet, the whispers continued, suggesting schemes and alliances even from her shadowy refuge. The marriage of her daughter, Elizabeth of York, to Henry VII, uniting the turbulent factions of Lancaster and York, signified the culmination of Elizabeth's hidden ambitions. Elizabeth Woodville passed away in relative obscurity in 1492, enveloped in an air of suspicion that lingered long after her withdrawal from the royal court. Nevertheless, her legacy endured, having ascended from the depths of anonymity to wield influence as a queen and a lineage bearer to Britain's monarchical future. Her story raises questions about societal perceptions of agency for women, whether she was a seductress or simply a woman navigating a patriarchal landscape. The complexities surrounding her life mirror the depth of her character, enigmatic and indelible. Yet, soon after her tale, another royal narrative would begin, burdened by whispers before she even came of age. Princess Charlotte of Wales, who lived from 1796 to 1870, was envisioned as the potential saviour of the British monarchy. Many hoped she would bridge the rifts of a deeply divided court, temper the chaos surrounding her scandal-prone parents, and herald a new, pure lineage of royal heirs. Yet, fate had scripted a different tale. Her life resembled a fleeting burst of brilliance, romanticized over time, becoming the very essence of legend long before her untimely passing at age 21. Trapped in a web of dysfunction, Charlotte was born to King George IV, a man notorious for his excesses, vanity, and a proclivity for public scandal. Her mother, Caroline of Brunswick, also steeped in controversy, a recurring figure in our narrative, added fuel to the fire. Their union was marred by coldness and betrayal, a stark disaster that left Charlotte feeling less like a cherished daughter and more like a pawn in a bitter royal custody feud. Her upbringing was lonesome. Shuffled from one residence to another, she was more a diplomatic tool than a beloved child. Her education was compromised, prioritized based on political loyalty rather than merit, her friendship surveilled, her correspondence scrutinized, and her wardrobe inspected for any hint of rebellion. Yet, against all odds, Charlotte emerged relatable in an otherwise rigid royal milieu. With sharp wit, emotional depth, and a robust independence, she defied the traditional decorum expected of young princesses. Challenging authority was a norm. Her voracious reading and sardonic commentary pierced the court's pretenses, as if she would have thrived amid the modern landscape of social media. Then came the suitors. The first scandal arose with Captain Charles Hesse, a compelling figure who stirred intrigue amidst whispers. Their relationship, whether deep romance or mere emotional connection, sparked outrage. Hesse's background was unsuitable, and Charlotte's kin insisted he depart, stealing yet another semblance of autonomy from her. The Crown arranged various suitors, including Prince William of Orange, presented as nothing more than a political maneuver. Charlotte met him, offered a polite smile, and then boldly rejected him with a dramatic flair. Her reasoning was simple. She found him unappealing, a display that shook the establishment to its core. A royal defying foreign alliances shook sentiments, inspiring waves of commentary, while her poise under pressure remained unshaken. Ultimately, Charlotte found solace with Prince Leopold of Saxe-Coburg, a calm and sensible companion amid the turbulence of her life. Lacking political grandeur, Leopold offered the support Charlotte craved. Exhausted and desperate, the crown acquiesced, and they wed in 1816, much to the nation's delight. For a brief moment, they embodied a fairy tale love, brimming with promise and devoid of royal malaise. Their short-lived marriage seemed joyful, a moment of genuine happiness. However, happiness proved fleeting. In 1817, after an agonizing labor lasting 50 hours, Charlotte gave birth to a stillborn son. Soon after, she succumbed to complications, leaving a nation enveloped in grief. Streets filled with mourners, shops shuttered, and public tears flowed as a symbol of hope was extinguished. In death, Charlotte morphed into an emblem, a canvas for others to color with their interpretations, be it the youthful innocent, the spirited rebel, or the tragic bride who never ascended to the throne. What history often neglects to address are the messier details of Charlotte's life, the affairs, whispered rumors of liaisons with officers, artists, and gentlemen of dubious repute. Stories of lost letters and clandestine strolls in moonlit gardens, potentially innocent yet shrouded in speculation. Were the rumors grounded in truth? Perhaps. Did she embody a uniquely passionate spirit for her era? Undoubtedly. Yet, to reduce her to mere scandal is to overlook her essence. She was a royal yearning for agency, and in the gilded confines of early 19th century monarchy, that assertiveness stood as a radical statement. In death, if Charlotte's fervent existence inspired lament for missed possibilities, the next woman in the annals of royal history emerged not merely as a symbol of what could have been, but as a vibrant affirmation of a woman asserting her desires, defiantly pursuing her forbidden love even as she fled the constraints that bound her. Lady Arabella Stuart, born in 1575 and departed by 1615, was not merely a noble woman. She was a figure shrouded in intrigue and peril. Positioned disturbingly close to the throne with royal heritage and the spectre of Elizabeth, the first ever present, Arabella navigated a world fraught with both opportunity and anxiety. Too important to overlook, yet too entwined in royal lineage to be fully trusted, her life unfurled within a fraught chiaroscuro of power dynamics, often eliciting hushed whispers through history. Though her name seldom graces the grand narratives of monarchs, she lingered at the edge of scandal, a potential upheaval awaiting its moment of ignition. As the great-granddaughter of Margaret Tudor, Henry VIII's sister, she held a legitimate claim to the English throne, a status that in tumultuous times felt more like a curse than a blessing. From an early age, Arabella endured what could only be described as a gilded form of imprisonment, tended to by those who scrutinized her every move. While she donned the vestiges of nobility, she was neither demure nor compliant. Distinguished by her sharp intellect and fluency in multiple languages, she exhibited a spirit that could hardly be contained by courtly constraints. As she matured, Arabella became a focal point of delicate diplomatic negotiations, courted by influential men from all walks of life. However, the true scandal emerged not from her suitors, but from the secret union she forged with William Seymour in 1610, a bold act that sent shockwaves through the royal corridors. Their marriage, an act of fervent defiance against King James I, posed a significant threat to the stability of succession and sent tremors through the throne. Upon discovery, the repercussions were swift. William found himself imprisoned within the Tower of London while Arabella was placed under house arrest, their communication closely monitored. Yet, defying their confinement, a daring escape unfolded in 1611 when Arabella disguised herself as a man, seeking to reunite with her husband for a daring flight to France. For a fleeting instant, the stars seemed to align, but the plan unraveled when timing betrayed them. Arabella was seized mid-journey, and though William reached the continent, he too faced the shadow of exile. Their tale took a tragic turn as Arabella faced the oppressive solitude of her imprisonment, suffering both physical decline and emotional erosion. Dismissed in her pleas for leniency, she slowly faded from the court's memory until her death in 1615, attributed to illness yet steeped in the gravity of her isolation. Posthumously, her romantic entanglements continued to stir curiosity, with rumors of past lovers swirling amidst courtly gossip. Whether these speculations were mere fancies or echoes of truth mattered little, as they painted Arabella as a complex figure, a protagonist in a narrative where perceptions shaped her legacy. To some, she was a traitor; to others, a misunderstood hero. Yet, the essence of her danger lay not in her lineage or marriage, but in her audacity to resist being merely a pawn in the royal game. In this dramatic landscape, where bloodlines intersect with ambitions, Arabella Stuart emerges as a beacon of defiance and desire, underscoring that at the intersection of love and power, the lines of history can shift dramatically. But as we turn the page to our next queen, we will unveil a woman who not only dismissed the boundaries of royal expectation but embraced the allure of a man outside her world, helping to alter the course of history in ways unimagined. 15. The enigmatic Queen Catherine of Valois, 1401 to 1437. In the shadowy corridors of history, Queen Catherine of Valois emerges as an emblematic figure, a perfect medieval queen consort, embodying grace and noble significance. The daughter of Charles VI of France and Isabeau of Bavaria, Catherine's life began amid the turbulence of royal instability, thrust into English affairs against the backdrop of the Hundred Years' War. Her marriage to Henry V was intended to conclude a bitter rivalry between England and France, yet it evolved into a mere prologue for a narrative far richer and more complex. This union, a strategy to cement Henry's claims to the French throne, saw Catherine, still a girl of just 18, given to the king in 1420 as a treaty bargain. With a striking blend of elegance and political quiet, she exemplified the ideal consort. However, just 2 years into their marriage, Henry succumbed to illness, leaving Catherine a young widow at 21, burdened with an infant son, Henry VI, who would shortly ascend to kingship. An ordinary scenario might position Catherine among Europe's most formidable women, yet she quickly became perceived as nothing more than a royal hazard, her beauty and motherhood casting shadows of uncertainty. This perception was not unfounded. The concern surrounding widow queens, especially those with potential heirs, was palpable. The English Parliament responded with urgency. A law was enacted that prohibited any queen from remarrying without the infant king's consent. Catherine's situation appeared bleak, effectively captured within royal constraints, her independence stifled with a decree that implied, "Stay virtuous, stay silent." Yet, ironically, Catherine was no passive figure. During her lengthy period of widowhood, she embarked on a clandestine affair with a man of humble origins, Owen Tudor, a Welsh courtier. The true beginnings of this relationship remain elusive, shrouded in speculation, but what is certain is that it evolved into more than mere whispers. Living discreetly together, they bore several children, including Edmund Tudor, who would become the grandfather of Henry VIII, thus intertwining their fates with the very heart of English monarchy. The repercussions of this hidden liaison were significant. Upon its discovery, Catherine faced the fierce judgment of society. Accusations of immorality and impropriety echoed throughout the court, a queen forming a life where the commoner stirred scandal and intrigue. Critics depicted her in less than flattering terms, suggesting dubious pasts and suspect relationships, projecting fears and cultural anxieties onto her character. Catherine's death in 1437 at just 35 years of age, likely due to illness, did little to alter her children's status within nobility, obscured yet undeniable. Owen Tudor experienced a tumultuous fate, imprisoned and executed, echoing the anonymity of his origins. Nevertheless, Catherine's legacy transcended her personal trials. It reverberated through time, eventually influencing the very fabric of English royalty. Her grandson Henry VII would later exalt their union, transforming a covert romance into a foundational myth of dynastic power. Was Catherine reckless, or was she simply in love? Perhaps both. A royal woman who forged her own destiny amidst social and legal constraints, she represented a subtle rebellion against the stifling norms of her time. History reveals her as a figure navigating the contours of personal agency, living beyond the confines imposed upon her, instilling defiance elegantly woven through her lineage. Yet even as Catherine cloaked her rebellion in romance, future royals would take their liberties more openly. As our story unfolds from this captivating queen, we shift focus to another figure of history, whose own indulgences and entanglements drew admiration and scandal alike, a daughter of royalty who wore her assertiveness with pride and unapologetic flair. Princess Louise, Duchess of Argyll, lived from 1848 to 1939. The sixth offspring of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert, she was destined to fit into the mold of a Victorian princess. Yet, from an early age, Louise defied expectations, gravitating instead towards the worlds of art, politics, and a scandalous pursuit of personal freedom that left her mother peeking through lace curtains in disbelief. A beauty wielding sharp intellect and an assertive voice, her traits, while lauded in a duchess, were deemed troublesome for a queen's daughter. Louise didn't just harbor independent thoughts, she articulated them boldly, challenging court customs and scrutinizing marriage as a social construct. Her irreverent comments regarding her mother's rules spoke volumes in a royal family where emotional restraint was paramount. This defiance extended into her passion for art, which surpassed the simple embroidery of her contemporaries. She honed her skills in sculpture at the National Art Training School, becoming the first royal woman to showcase her creations publicly, an audacious move in an era when royals were expected to remain decorative rather than creative. Louise frequented art studios, often accompanied by male artists, generating whispers and intrigue amongst salon circles. Notably, one of her alleged partners was the sculptor Joseph Edgar Boehm, a significantly older man with a penchant for nurturing gifted women. Their relationship raised eyebrows, particularly after Boehm's unexpected death, shrouded in speculation about his final moments with Louise. The palace conveniently labeled it an at-home death, yet the circumstances and Louise's agitation gave rise to rampant gossip among historians and columnists alike. Her romantic history remained equally fascinating and mysterious, rumored to include a variety of suitors from different walks of life, with whispers suggesting a secret child born of an affair with a commoner, a baby allegedly erased from royal history. While the evidence remains circumstantial, disappearing servants and coded diary entries only fuel speculation amongst historians obsessed with royal affairs. In the midst of this tumult, Queen Victoria orchestrated a marriage between Louise and John Campbell, Marquis of Lorne, a politically motivated union disguised as romance. Lorne, an aristocrat but not of royal blood, aligned with the Queen's interests and was speculated to be indifferent to women. Despite the lack of passion in their marriage, Louise continued her quest for independence, establishing her own residences, traveling solo, and living apart from her husband for prolonged periods. Her private correspondence hinted at relationships not publicly acknowledged, suggesting depths of emotion beneath the surface of royal duty. A poignant reference to a dearest companion left unspoken shows that beneath her carefully curated public persona, Louise clung to intimate attachments that history would overshadow. Living to the age of 91, Louise would witness monumental shifts throughout her lifetime, including the decline of her mother's empire and the reign of 6 monarchs. Though many of her secrets found a quiet resting place over time, her legacy of rebellion lingered. Her activities, categorized as promiscuous by some, were a reflection of the societal constraints placed upon women. Carefully navigating her world, she was bold yet cautious, crafting a life that danced just outside the constraints of royal propriety, where rumors thrived and truths were seldom spoken. As Princess Louise spun her web of intrigue, the next queen in our tale would immerse herself in the political stage, where her passions and rivalries wove their way through the very fabric of power, a ruler whose whispered desires resonate down the ages, echoing in the annals of Europe's thrones. Queen and of Great Britain, who reigned from 1665 to 1714, is remembered not just for the significant political unification of England and Scotland and the elevation of parliamentary power, but for the deeply emotional landscape of her court. Enveloped in whispers, rivalries, and mysterious relationships, her reign was marked by an intensity that has perplexed historians for ages. Unlike her royal predecessors who forged their bonds through dynastic alliances and formed her most vital connections with women. Born the second daughter of James II, her life was shaped by unexpected challenges. With her mother's early death, her father's downfall during the Glorious Revolution, and the heart-wrenching loss of all her children, and entered her reign hardened and enigmatic. Though she lacked the flamboyance or charisma of figures like Elizabeth I, her reign was no less impactful. At the heart of her story was her relationship with Sarah Churchill, the Duchess of Marlborough. Their bond was more than mere friendship. Speculation of romantic affection loomed large, as their letters overflowed with an intensity that made boundaries blur. With declarations such as "I am wholly yours and I cannot live without you," the emotional gravity of their correspondence has led scholars to debate the nature of their connection. Despite the absence of concrete evidence, it's clear that their affection surpassed the customary limits of sisterhood. As political dynamics shifted, so did Anne's affections. Growing resentment led her to another favorite, Abigail Masham, who was dramatically different from Sarah. This shift ignited through court scandal, with Sarah accusing Abigail of unduly influencing the Queen and even of seducing her. Pamphlets circulated, branding Anne as the Sapphic Queen and suggesting a relationship that strayed from societal norms. As the mounting pressures of favour, loyalty, and betrayal weighed on her, Anne distanced herself from Sarah in 1711, never quite mending their fractured friendship. Meanwhile, Abigail became a significant figure at court until Anne's death. Anne's reign, therefore, was not only one of policy but was also intricately woven with a tapestry of personal connections and emotional complexities that have captivated historians. Was Queen and a woman whose emotional dependencies disrupted the political landscape? Absolutely. And similarly, the next royal figure in our exploration, a medieval countess turned queen, made headlines for her audacious affairs, boldly challenging societal norms and scandalizing the nobility. Mary II of Scotland, Countess of Boulogne, lived approximately from 1082 until 1116, yet her story often slips through the cracks of history, forgotten not for a lack of significance, but because her kind of scandal feels too medieval, too inconvenient for the record keepers of her era. A woman who ignited the standards of royalty and fanned the flames of rumour, Mary left behind a legacy that even her peers could scarcely ignore. Born into the esteemed lineage of Malcolm III of Scotland and St. Margaret of Wessex, she represented a remarkable fusion of Scottish vigour and Anglo-Saxon devotion. While her sister Matilda ascended to the English throne as the wife of King Henry I, Mary chose a more turbulent journey. From a young age, Mary was educated in a convent, a common fate for noble women. Yet, unlike many of her contemporaries who embraced the life of a nun, Mary broke free in dramatic fashion. Her unexpected departure from the convent, without official approval, sparked doubts about her commitment to religious vows, raising eyebrows throughout the ecclesiastical community. While one might have expected her to marry respectably after leaving the convent, Mary had her own rebellious plan in mind. She eloped. Her union with Eustace III, the Count of Boulogne, wasn't the result of political maneuvering, but rather a vibrant romance that unfolded outside the norm. Eustace belonged to a powerful lineage in northern France, yet the clandestine nature of their match raised concerns. Was it love, a strategic decision, or a rebellious act gone awry? The truth is elusive buried. Yet what followed next was both shocking and transformative. Becoming Countess of Boulogne, Mary gave birth to a daughter, Matilda, who would later hold the title of Queen of England, married to King Stephen. But it wasn't just her role as countess that created a stir. Mary's assertiveness in governance and her involvement in political affairs raised eyebrows, challenging existing norms, especially amid rumors regarding her previous religious life. Speculation mounted regarding her character, with whispers suggesting her relationships strayed into questionable territory. While evidence remained elusive, medieval gossip thrived, weaving tales of alleged liaisons and moral ambiguity, deeply entrenched in the assumptions about her nature. What stands out is how contemporary chroniclers, some with an agenda, addressed Mary's life, full of unspoken insinuations of treachery and impropriety, yet leaving behind more questions than answers. With Mary passing away in 1116 at around 30, her legacy rose above mere scandal, cloaked in a whispered tone of suspicion. The daughter who followed her would emerge as a figure of virtue, a stark juxtaposition. Mary III slipped into obscurity, a spectral figure hovering between heroism and villainy, a woman who resisted the confines of authority, without ever giving a clear account of her own tale. As the narratives of history spun past her, what truly remains is a portrait of defiance against prevailing order, and, like ripples in a still pond, heralds a future royal rebellion draped not in veils, but in the richness of silk, hinting at adventures beyond the throne. In the early years of the 11th century, a remarkable figure lingered in the shadows of history, Queen Emma of Normandy. Born circa 985, she epitomized resilience, surviving the ruin of one dynasty while marrying into another, emerging not just unscathed but formidable in her influence. A queen twice married, first to Ethel the Unready and then to Knut the Great, Emma's life unfolded against a backdrop of turbulent English politics, where she was more than a mere observer, she was a pivotal force. Emma was steeped in royal lineage, born as the daughter of Richard I and sister to Richard II, linked to William the Conqueror himself. Her marriage at the age of 16 to Edward the Unready wasn't cloaked in romance but rather strategic necessity, uniting a foreign queen with a king troubled by his own failures and the threat of the Danish invasion. With Ethel, she bore several children, including Edward the Confessor, but their relationship leaned toward the transactional, a queen whose foreignness was a stark contrast to a king fighting to keep his throne from crumbling. The dynamics shifted dramatically with Ethel's death in 1016. Knut, a Danish conqueror whose name sparked fear and admiration, swept in, defeating Ethel's son and marrying Emma. This surprising alliance changed the course of Emma's story. Choosing to align herself with Knut rather than retreating to a convent, she became queen anew, this time to the man who had taken her first husband's crown. Together, they had a son, Knut, intertwining their legacies in an intricate web of succession fraught with jealousy and political maneuvering. Emma's parenting sparked controversy. Some accused her of favoring her Danish son over her Anglo-Saxon ones, while rumors circulated of her cunning strategy to secure power. Allegations of her familiar ties with influential men, notably Bishop Stigand, painted her as more than a queen. She was perceived as a woman capable of wielding power in a world dominated by men. Despite the whispers of impropriety, Emma remained a powerful player in Western European politics, negotiating with kings, funding religious institutions, and even commissioning her own biography, an extraordinary feat for a woman of her time. The shadows of her relationships, however, loomed large. Accusations of seduction clung to her like a shroud, twisting perceptions of her authority into something more nefarious. Following Canut's death in 1035, Emma found herself at the heart of a succession crisis, her loyalties pulled between her son Harthacnut and Canut's illegitimate heir. Attempts to rule as regent were thwarted, forcing her into exile until political tides shifted once again. She returned only to witness her son Edward's ascension, where she navigated court life until her death in 1052. Emma's legacy remains an enigma, as chronicles could only hint at her true nature, shrouding her authority in insinuation. Was she promiscuous? Likely not, but her power was undeniable, a force to be reckoned with in an era that often reduced female influence to mere manipulation. What she truly left behind was a legacy knit into the fabric of her time, a testament to the wars she weathered, the kingdoms she influenced, and the long game she played with unparalleled acumen. As we reflect on history's parade of queens that followed, many would wear the garb of scandal or satire, while Emma's story is forever intertwined with the richness of political intrigue and the whispers of power that echoed through the ages. Queen Caroline of Ansbach, born in 1683, was anything but a mere ornament. In an era when queens were expected to remain passive, she emerged as an unexpected force, breaking the mold with her audacious involvement in court affairs. Rather than merely enduring her role, she infiltrated the very fabric of royal life, influencing and occasionally directing it from the shadows. But with power came complications, and, much like politically astute women of her time, admiration came hand in hand with growing accusations, rumors of affairs, snide ballads, and the easy whispers accusing her of keeping unsavory company. Born Wilhelmina Charlotte Caroline in a minor German duchy, she faced tragedy early, orphaned and subsequently raised by a politically astute stepmother. The education she received was progressive for her time, enabling her to navigate the complexities of court life. Fluent in multiple languages and well-versed in Enlightenment thought, Caroline was not merely a figure to be admired, but a powerful intellect capable of engaging in deep discussions with bishops and lords alike. Her marriage to George Augustus, destined to become King George II of Great Britain, was viewed as a reasonably strategic political alliance. In contrast to his rigid disposition, Caroline was shrewd, poised, and transformed their relationship into a partnership marked by efficiency rather than overt affection. Caroline became an invaluable advisor to George, often playing a vital role in decisions from governmental appointments to religious disputes, both privately and publicly. This strong influence, however, was a source of concern for many in Parliament. Throughout history, formidable queens have faced a specific kind of scrutiny. The critique rarely arises from their actions but rather from speculation about behind-doors dealings. And so began the whispers of Caroline's influence being unnaturally strong, her connections questionable, and her theological interests merely a facade for other, more illicit pursuits. Caroline's court evolved into a center of power intertwined with innuendo, where satirical writings depicted her as manipulative and immoral. Speculation swirled around her close associations, notably with the court physician Dr. John Freind and politician Robert Walpole, Britain's first de facto prime minister. Some wondered about the nature of these relationships. Were they political with underlying motives or something more intimate? Walpole himself dismissed these rumors, claiming she was too sagacious for such folly, yet the insinuations endured. Even her correspondence with her spiritual advisor, esteemed clergyman Samuel Clarke, drew raised eyebrows. Their intellectual exchanges, rich in theological insight, seemed to provoke suspicion about the nature of their bond. Allegations of hidden desires and emotional entanglements ran rampant, yet there was no concrete evidence, merely pamphlets and continual courtly gossip fueling the narrative. Caroline's dynamic with her husband only intensified the scandal surrounding her. Although George II appeared publicly devoted, he notably maintained an affair with his longtime mistress, Henrietta Howard, who served alongside Caroline. Instead of ousting her rival, Caroline employed a tactical approach by allowing Henrietta into their fold. Critics interpreted this as weakness, yet friends recognized it as a display of control. By welcoming her husband's mistress, Caroline kept her adversaries close at hand and safeguarded her own authority. It was a remarkable demonstration of emotional strategy, and the court was deeply unsettled. Despite her cleverness, The rumours persisted. To many in 18th century England, the notion of a queen who was both intellectually astute and sexually liberated was too complex for societal norms, and she had to fit into one extreme or the other. The labels of saint or seductress were the only options available. Competency seemed unimaginable. Caroline passed away in 1737 after enduring a protracted illness, still advising the king from her sickbed. Her last words to George, amidst her great suffering, were filled with profound attachment. "Do not grieve too much for me. Dear George, I am your true wife." His grief was palpable. He reportedly never took another mistress after her demise, which was perhaps the most surprising twist of her tale. In examining Queen Caroline of Ansbach, the question remains, was she guilty of indiscretions? In terms of scandalous affairs, likely not. But if one considers her quest for power, independence, and meaningful relationships with influential men, the answer is undoubtedly yes. She was deemed too knowledgeable, too involved, and too visible, and in the royal arena, that was sufficient to earn her a reputation. If Caroline navigated her rivals with wit and strategy, our next royal took a wilder path, entangling herself in a web of lovers and secret marriages, creating a scandalous landscape at court, well before the sensational tabloids of modern times. Joan of Kent, born in 1328 and passing in 1385, was a strikingly beautiful noblewoman whose life was anything but ordinary. With her enchanting presence, she swept through the English court like a tempest, challenging its very foundations and ensnaring it in a web of legal turmoil, leaving the royal establishment to grapple with an unforeseen crisis. Dubbed the Fair Maid of Kent, her narrative was steeped in complexity, filled with tumultuous marriages and a labyrinth of contradictory documentation that could have overwhelmed even the savviest lawyers. As the daughter of Edmund of Woodstock, a royal descendant from Edward I, Joan's lineage granted her both privilege and peril. Tragically, her father's execution for treason marked her early years with a shadow of rebellion. Yet, she grew up at court, recognized for her beauty, charm, and indomitable spirit, traits that could have led her down a conventional path of quiet matrimony. However, at the tender age of 12, she daringly wed Thomas Holland, a knight of lesser rank, in secret. Their union, lacking royal approval, could have faded into obscurity, but other forces intervened. She was soon separated from Holland and married to William Montague, heir to the Earl of Salisbury. Intriguingly, Joan maintained that her marriage to Montague was null, citing her preceding bond with Holland, a claim met with skepticism by Montague's influential family. With Holland absent on the Crusades, the situation sunk deeper into a quagmire of legal disputes. Upon his return, Holland sought the Pope's intervention to affirm their union. After prolonged ecclesiastical debates, Joan's second marriage was annulled, reinstating her as Holland's true wife, igniting whispers throughout the court. Did she orchestrate this intricate deception? Having regained her partner, Joan experienced a semblance of normal life, raising children with Holland until his untimely death in 1360. Now a wealthy widow, her mix of courtly and marital experience intensified her allure. Enter the Black Prince, Edward, son of King Edward III, embodying the archetype of a medieval knight. Their union, though steeped in repeated scandal, secured royal endorsement, elevating Joan to Princess of Wales and mother of the future Richard II. Yet, her past continued to cast a long shadow, attracting rumours about her influence over Richard and her closeness to particular lords. Joan's life after death in 1385 remained perplexing. She was seen as either reckless or shrewd, a pawn in her patriarchal struggles or a master in navigating its complexities. Ultimately, Joan of Kent's true scandal lay not within her clandestine marriages or royal rise, but in her unwavering refusal to conform to societal expectations. She navigated her own fate boldly, leaving a legacy that was anything but subdued. As we transition from her remarkable story, we'll uncover the next royal, whose life finds itself under the glaring lights of public scrutiny, a realm dominated by fleeting fame and poignant truths. Princess Diana, the Princess of Wales, reigned from 1961 until 1997, captivating the world not merely as a royal but as its very embodiment. Through a tapestry woven of charm, sorrow, and unyielding media scrutiny, she emerged as an emblematic figure of the 20th century, constantly examined, dissected, and speculated upon. Her image, eyes softly downcast beneath feathered bangs, was omnipresent, from elegant gowns at gala events to those quiet hospital visits that lingered silently in public consciousness. Who was she meeting? What truths did she hold? And crucially, who left whom? This reputation for romantic escapades didn't materialize without cause. It was nurtured by the press, certain palace insiders, and perhaps most intimately, by Diana herself. In a royal establishment famed for its rigid composure and control over narratives, she ventured into uncharted territory. She spoke her truth, and with that revelation, unleashed a tide that was impossible to contain. Born Diana Spencer in 1961 to an aristocratic lineage intricately linked to royal circles, her own childhood brimmed with luxury but also emotional turbulence, a bitter family divorce, the isolation of boarding schools, and an enduring hunger for affection that would shape her life story. In 1980, Diana caught Prince Charles's eye. Only 19, she was a shy young woman thrust into a life for which she was hardly prepared. Their engagement, marked by awkwardness and a sense of impending doom, bore the infamous response from Charles when asked if they were in love, "Whatever in love means." This could easily be regarded not just as a warning but a clarion call. The wedding in 1981 attracted over 750 million viewers, and Diana seemed to emerge from her carriage at St. Paul's Cathedral as a vision from a bygone era. Yet, the fairy tale quickly unraveled. It was less a romantic tale and more a meticulously crafted disintegration. Haunted almost from the outset, Diana was not oblivious to the fact that she wasn't Charles's true love, that honour lay with Camilla Parker Bowles, forever lingering in the backdrop. While the palace perpetuated this deception, Diana began to write her own narrative, engaging fully in royal duties, reaching out to those suffering from AIDS, and navigating landmines. Yet, behind her radiant facade, she developed a private life that included confidants, intimate phone calls, and yes, even lovers. One of her first well-known relationships emerged with James Hewitt, a dashing cavalry officer, whose affair with Diana became an open secret as her marriage deteriorated. Their romance lasted several years amid heavy media scrutiny, leading Diana to express her mixed feelings publicly. The tabloids reveled in every scandalous detail, igniting outrageous conspiracy theories that persist to this day, theories ranging from absurd to scandalous. But Diana's romantic life was far from limited to Hewitt. Others like her bodyguard Barry Manickey and a host of businessmen and socialites filled her world. This arc of connections blossomed into a complex web of emotional truths. It wasn't merely the number of these liaisons that grabbed attention. It was the raw emotional granularity of these relationships. These weren't mere political partnerships. They were human, often fraught, and always scrutinized with pinpoint accuracy. Diana laid bare her struggles, speaking candidly in private discussions with biographer Andrew Morton and later during the telling 1995 BBC Panorama interview, where she famously stated, "There were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded." The world collectively held its breath as the royal facade crumbled. Diana transformed before our eyes from a modest bride into a self-possessed, politically astute woman reclaiming the narrative of her life. Her romantic endeavors shifted from a potential flaw to a powerful act of defiance, a signal that if the crown wouldn't safeguard her, She would seek love on her own terms, irrespective of the headlines it might attract. By the time she commenced a relationship with Dodi Fade in 1997, it was evident that her every action was subjected to relentless scrutiny and piecemeal interpretation. But even her tragic, abrupt demise did little to conclude her story. Instead, it crystallized her existence, forever casting her as both a regal figure and a captivating myth. Was Diana merely a diva, as some of her tabloid critics alleged? No. She was a woman, wounded by countless emotional scars, yearning for genuine connection within the stone walls of a palace steeped in emotional detachment. Her romantic escapades, while untidy, embodied the audacity of the human experience. Meanwhile, as Diana navigated her tumultuous public saga, the next queen on our list played a more subtle game. A medieval consort who, while maintaining an impeccable facade, existed in a court rife with enigmatic favorites, ambiguous partnerships, and a smokescreen of plausible deniability, keeping the elusive truth forever just beyond reach. Queen Philippa of Han, who lived between 1310 and 1369, is often celebrated as the Good Queen, a gentle soul and devoted wife to Edward III. Her legacy shines brightly through stained glass and historical texts, where she is portrayed as a virtuous figure who famously interceded for the burghers of Killala, won the affection of the English populace, and bore 13 children, including the infamous Black Prince. In an era plagued by ruthless monarchs and intrigue, Philippa stands out as a beacon of warmth and kindness. But isn't it intriguing that such a well-crafted image carries with it whispers of intrigue? Beneath the polished portrayal by royal historians lies a more complex narrative shrouded in speculation. After all, queens seen as exemplary are not exempt from suspicion, particularly when they are foreign and navigate a landscape of ambitious courtiers. Born into the noble house of Avicens, in what is now modern Belgium, Philippa possessed a sharp intellect and a keen political acumen, traits not routinely nurtured in medieval women, much less in prospective queens. Marrying Edward III at only 14, she exuded a grace that belied her youth. Their union appeared stable, marked by genuine affection. Edward valued her insights and entrusted her with significant power. She accompanied him on military endeavors, served as regent when necessary, and governed extensive territories independently. Yet, within the shadows of the court, rumors began to brew, not during the height of their reign, but rather in the hushed corridors among servants and discontented nobles. Patterns developed: a selective circle of courtiers, unusual favors bestowed upon certain knights, and private meetings that raised eyebrows. The term favorites began to circulate discreetly, hinting at something unspoken. Then there was Sir Walter Moe, Edward III's steadfast companion and Philippa's trusted military advisor. His valour earned him titles and lands, yet the depth of his bond with the Queen stoked court gossip, too deep to dismiss entirely. Jean Froissart, a devoted court poet, championed her narrative, lavishing praise that bordered on adoration, leaving observers to question the authenticity of Philippa's legacy. The familiarity between Queen and chronicler raised eyebrows, suggesting her history might blur the lines between fact and carefully crafted myth. Adding layers to this intricate narrative is the diverse environment of Philippa's court, a melting pot of artists, musicians, and advisors. She brought attendants from Hainault, who enjoyed generous patronage and loyalty to their queen. This deep commitment raised questions about discretion and undertones of secrecy. Furthermore, as a vital diplomatic figure, her marriage was a strategic alliance, enabling her to engage with family across Europe and wield considerable influence in political matters. Such autonomy melded with her charm aroused admiration but also raised suspicion. There's no definitive proof of infidelity or scandal within this narrative. Yet, the lack of evidence didn't quell the murmurs. In a world plagued by powerful men and a queen who thrived independently, the void was filled with speculation. Upon her death in 1369, Philippa was mourned deeply, her legacy linked to Edward III, who chose not to remarry. Their shared tomb symbolizes a steadfast devotion. However, history rarely offers such clarity. Was her portrayal of virtue genuine or simply an artful deception? Did she find solace in the company of her favorites, or did she strategically wield affection as a tool in the same manner as kings? This enigma may remain unsolved, yet the ongoing discourse reveals much. The narratives of queens celebrated for their goodness often hide the complexities of their lived realities. And while Philippa's virtue may shine in history, her successor would don her reputation not as a garb of purity but as armor amid whispers of rivalry. Queen Henrietta Maria, a Catholic bride hailing from France, arrived in England in a time of religious turmoil, stepping into a predominantly Protestant realm already cloaked in suspicion before she uttered a single word in English. Married to King Charles I in 1625 at the tender age of 17, her foreignness, devout faith, and youth were qualities that sparked immediate unease among many members of Parliament. But it was more than just her religious allegiance that unsettled the English. There was a growing belief that Henrietta was no mere consort. She possessed an assertive spirit, surrounded herself with loyal male companions, wielded significant influence over her husband, and openly defied the established norms. From the outset, she was anything but discreet. Arriving with a retinue of French courtiers and clergy, Henrietta openly refused to partake in Protestant services, an act that didn't merely cause a stir but ignited political uproar. She often found herself in conflict with Charles's foremost advisers, insisted on expelling English ladies-in-waiting, and maintained close ties with her French compatriots, many of whom were young men whose constant presence raised eyebrows. As tension simmered, the English court began to observe curious patterns. Gentlemen from France lingering well beyond their expected stay, artists and entertainers granted unusual access to royal quarters, and the peculiar camaraderie within the Queen's tightly knit circle became fodder for anti-Catholic pamphleteers. Henrietta was depicted not merely as a queen but as a cunning seductress, thought to wield her charm and whispers to influence state matters. One figure often at her side was Henry Jermyn, who would later become the Earl of St. Albans. A charismatic courtier, he flourished in Henrietta's favour, managing her affairs and finances, and even standing by her side during the tumult of the Civil War. Speculation abounded regarding the true nature of their bond, particularly as Jermyn remained single, fostering rumours of intimacy that suggested he might be more than just a trusted aide and that her children might resemble him rather than their royal father. While these allegations were often brushed aside by historians, they reverberated through pamphlets and Parliament, illustrating the piercing whispers of the time. Henrietta's political machinations only heightened these rumours. Engaged in clandestine negotiations and appealing to foreign rulers for aid during the Civil War, she also gathered funds and troops from across Europe. Her correspondence with Charles was affectionate and filled with strategic advice, leading some historians to view her either as a loyal spouse or as a pivotal influence guiding a destabilized monarchy. After the royalist downfall, she fled to France, seeking refuge in a convent. Yet, retirement was a misnomer. She remained a force in exile, hosting an alternative court and tirelessly advocating for royalist restoration. Germaine, her loyal companion, remained close by as their association endured amidst ongoing whispers of their relationship's depth. Though she made a brief return to England during the Restoration, her days of genuine influence had faded. Nonetheless, the spectre of her reputation persisted. Henrietta Maria's perception was never wholly redeemed, overshadowed not just by her political maneuvers but by the enigmatic qualities that unsettled 17th-century England, a queen draped in secrets, wielding power, and entangled in questionable intimacies with certain men. Preceding her in legacy was a future queen who would share her name, destined to carve out her own colourful, chaotic, and scandalous mark within the candlelit salons of Georgian society. In the annals of history, one name from the 18th century stands out before the iconic Diana of today, Lady Diana Spencer, a woman whose allure captivated the elite long before tabloids were born. With roots in the esteemed Spencer family, she was a granddaughter of the 3rd Earl of Sunderland, inherently connected to wealth and power. Yet, it wasn't solely her lineage that made her infamous. It was her heart that led her astray, showcasing a pattern of romantic entanglements that shook even the most jaded members of Georgian society. Diana's love life resembled a theatrical performance, an open invitation to courtiers, poets, and politicians alike, each vying for her attention. Her reputation was not defined by a singular scandal, but by an echoing chorus of flirtations and passionate affairs, earning her the playful title of the Mary Spencer, suggestive of both charm and risk. Unlike many women of her standing, Diana thrived in spotlight, effortlessly merging political discussions with flirtation at her famed salons. Her correspondence remains a testament to her wit and daring, as she freely mingled with individuals whose integrity mirrored her own volatility. Among her myriad suitors was a controversial politician whose spirited connection with Diana sparked parliamentary whispers about whether their romance influenced his political decisions, a question that loomed over every debate. Another notable link was to a military officer, entangled in rumors about dueling over her affections. Diana's refusal to marry, or perhaps to remain married, added to her mystique, as she appeared to dismiss every proposal with an air of defiance. This independence, radical for her time, painted her as both a figure of intrigue and discomfort, a noble woman navigating society without a husband. As the years passed, Lady Diana chose to step back from public life, holding quieter gatherings while her name lingered in memoirs as a symbol of both attraction and peril. Over time, she became a paradox, a liberated spirit scrutinized by a judgmental society, relished and ridiculed in equal measure. Though largely overlooked today, overshadowed by her 20th century counterpart, her story reveals a woman who sparks scandal not through political maneuvering but through her brazen disregard for societal norms. In her legacy, we find the essence of rebellion among royal women who lived boldly, laughing, loving, and writing outside the margins of their era. Their narratives resonate not for their perfect lives, but for their daring presence, a blend of danger and charisma etched into history.